What if a single dinosaur bone could flip everything we thought we knew about ancient history right on its head? Well, today we're digging into a discovery that's so unexpected, it might just force us to rethink the entire timeline of life on our planet. It all kicks off with this guy, a Tyrannosaurus rex femur. Now, on the outside, yeah, it looks pretty much like any old fossil. But what was found hiding inside is what challenges a core idea in science. So how on earth could one single bone have the power to rewrite history?
You heard that right. Back in 2005, scientists cracked open this T-Rex bone and they found flexible, stretchy, unfossilized tissue. I'm talking about things that looked just like blood vessels and cells. This was a bombshell because this bone is supposed to be 65 million years old, and soft tissue just shouldn't be there, period.
Okay, so to really get your head around this, lab studies and scientific models show that collagen, which is the exact protein they found in that bone, breaks down pretty fast. Even in the absolute best case scenario, it's gone in less than 100,000 years. So you've got a bone dated at 65 million years with something inside that shouldn't last 100,000. That's not a small error. That's a massive contradiction. And that is the mystery we're diving into today.
So, here's our game plan. We'll kick off with that shocking T-Rex discovery. Then, we're going to properly meet these terrible lizards. We'll take a quick tour of the biggest and baddest of them. After that, we'll look at some ancient clues that might point to a totally different history. And finally, we head back to the lab for the final verdict on that tissue.
All right, before we get into the really juicy evidence, let's get to know the stars of our show. What exactly is a dinosaur anyway? Well, the word dinosaur itself was invented way back in 1842 by a guy named Sir Richard Owen, and it literally means terrible lizard, which, let's be honest, is a pretty epic name that was inspired by these huge reptile-like fossils they were digging up. But what's fascinating is that while many of them were definitely lizard-like, not all of them are technically reptiles. Now, here's where the timeline we're investigating takes a really different path. The source material for this explainer puts forward a completely different origin story. It suggests that dinosaurs were created on the sixth day of creation, which would place them on Earth at the exact same time as other land animals and humans. So, to really get a feel for this mystery, let's meet the incredible creatures at the very center of it all. We're going to take a quick tour of the giants that once dominated the land, the sky, and even the seas. On land, you basically had three main groups. First, the carnivores, the theropods, think T-Rex. Then you had the seriously massive plant eaters, the sauropods, like the Brachiosaurus, which could weigh up to 100 tons. And of course, you had the ceratopsians, like Triceratops, with those iconic horns and that big bony frill. And speaking of T-Rex, here's a cool little fact from our source. Tyrannosaurus rex isn't just a name, it's a title. It actually means Tyrant Lizard King. I mean, with 6-inch-long teeth designed for ripping into things, I'd say the name fits perfectly. But it wasn't just about the big three. You had this whole crew of armored herbivores, too. Stegosaurs with those famous plates down their backs, ankylosaurs, who were basically walking tanks with a wrecking ball for a tail, and the pachycephalosaurs with those super thick dome-shaped heads. And get this, one theory is that those plates and frills weren't just for show. They might have worked like giant radiators, kind of like an elephant's ears, to help them cool down.
Looking up at the sky, you had the pterosaurs. Now, people often think of them as flying lizards or compare them to bats, but their design was totally unique. Their wing was a skin membrane stretched along a super long fourth finger, which actually left their other fingers free to be used as little claws. The biggest one, the Quetzalcoatlus, had a wingspan of almost 40 feet. Just imagine that.
And you better believe the oceans were just as full of giants. You had creatures like pliosaurs and plesiosaurs. These weren't dinosaurs that went for a swim. They were true marine animals with powerful paddle-like limbs they used to fly through the water, kind of like how a sea turtle or a penguin does today. The variety in the deep was just incredible. There was the ichthyosaurus, which looked and swam so much like a dolphin, we actually know it gave birth to live young. There were giant sea turtles called archelon with shells the size of a small car. And then you had the Kronosaurus, a massive pliosaur whose head, just its head, was 8 feet long. Okay, we've met the creatures. Now let's switch gears and look at a totally different line of evidence. Not from fossils, but from ancient history and legends. The big question is, are there clues that humans and dinosaurs actually cross paths? Our source points out that almost every ancient culture has stories about dragons or giant monsters. And it highlights the book of Job in the Bible, which gives these incredibly detailed descriptions of two creatures called Behemoth and Leviathan. This leads to a really mind-bending question from the source material. Are these just myths, legends about imaginary beasts? Or could they be something more? Could they be actual eyewitness accounts of real animals passed down through generations? Accounts of a time when humans and dinosaurs lived on Earth together? And that brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Back to the crime scene, if you will. We're going back to that T-Rex bone and the scientific smoking gun they found locked inside. So let's recap the facts of the case. A T-Rex femur, said to be 65 million years old, is found with soft, flexible tissue inside. After a lot of testing, this tissue is identified as collagen, a protein that's super common in animal bones. This was, and still is, a jaw-dropping find. And this chart really shows you the heart of the conflict. On one side, you have the standard timeline that says this bone is 65 million years old. On the other side, you have the physical evidence, the collagen, which all our lab data says just can't last more than 100,000 years. These two facts seem to be in a total head-on collision. So what did the analysis of the collagen actually show? Well, the big news was that it showed a 51% similarity to chicken collagen, and this was presented as proof that dinosaurs evolved into birds. But the source asks us to put that number into perspective. For example, human collagen is a 98% match to cow collagen. So looking at it that way, the source makes the argument that a 51% match is actually pretty weak. It claims this discovery does more to poke holes in the idea that dinosaurs are the direct ancestors of birds than it does to support it. And all of this leads to the source's main conclusion, that finding soft tissue in a dinosaur bone makes a lot more sense in a timeline of thousands of years, not millions. It argues that this physical evidence is a direct challenge to the conventional timescale, and that maybe, just maybe, dinosaurs died out for other reasons, like major climate shifts after a global flood that made the world a tough place for them to survive. So we're left with this one big, fascinating question to think about. If the physical evidence, the stuff we can actually touch and test, doesn't seem to fit the long-standing timeline, what other parts of the dinosaur story might need a fresh look? It's a puzzle that proves there's always more to discover.